Jesus stopped. He looked him straight in the eye and said something he never repeated to anyone again. The room fell silent. The man trembled. The words that came from the Master's mouth at that moment were so specific, so direct, that Jesus spoke them, looking into his eyes, as if he were delivering a secret from heaven. And then, never again. This unique phrase appears only once in the Bible. What Jesus said to him changed not only a life, but left a lesson hidden in the Gospels that few know. Today, you will discover these remarkable words of Jesus. You will understand why this intimate conversation between the Master and that man has never been repeated. And in the end, you will realize that perhaps this message is for you too. Because when Jesus speaks directly to the heart, once is enough to transform everything. That day, something different was in the air. Jesus was walking among the people when he suddenly stopped. It wasn't just any pause. It was the kind of pause that makes everyone around him realize something important is about to happen. Her eyes fixed on a specific man. It wasn't a casual glance, the kind you cast when searching for someone in a crowd. It was a penetrating look, one that went beyond the surface. Jesus, and the look that changes everything, was about to manifest there. Interestingly, Jesus had known this man for some time. They had spoken before. But at that particular moment, there was something different in the air, as if time itself had been waiting for those words to be spoken. People around began to sense the intensity of the moment. You know how the atmosphere becomes charged with anticipation, when even the wind seems to stop to listen? That's exactly what was happening. And then Jesus opened his mouth. But before revealing what he said, you need to understand who this man was who received one of the most unique messages in the Gospels. This wasn't one of the 12 apostles. It wasn't a Pharisee trying to catch him in a contradiction. It was someone much closer than we imagine, but whom history has almost forgotten. We're talking about Joseph of Arimathea. Yes, that rich man who lent his own tomb to Jesus. But what few know is that before the crucifixion, Joseph had already had personal encounters with Jesus. He was a respected member of the Sanhedrin, but secretly he believed the Master's words. The scene took place during one of the last weeks before Passover. Joseph had sought Jesus privately, away from the prying eyes of the other religious leaders. He was struggling with a decision that would change his life forever: to publicly declare his faith or remain a hidden disciple. Imagine the pressure he felt. A man of prestige with a high social standing, facing the dilemma between the safety of his reputation and the truth that burned in his heart. Joseph of Arimathea was on the edge of two worlds. It was in this context of tension and decision that Jesus looked deeply into his eyes. The Master knew exactly what was going on in that man's heart, and it was then that he spoke words he would never repeat to anyone again. But there's still more about this moment that you need to know. The place was a small garden near the Mount of Olives. The sun was setting, painting the sky with golden hues. Jesus and Joseph were alone, far from the hustle and bustle of the city and the constant arguments with religious leaders. Joseph had arrived there with a heavy heart. Pressure from the Sanhedrin was mounting against Jesus. He knew something terrible was being plotted, but he felt powerless to stop it. As a man torn between loyalty to his traditions and the truth he saw in Christ, he felt powerless. Jesus saw the anguish in his eyes. It wasn't just political or social concern. It was something much deeper. Joseph was facing a spiritual crisis that would define not only his earthly destiny, but his eternal destiny. Jesus' prophetic moment was about to unfold. He knew these would be some of his last conversations before the cross. And he also knew that Joseph would play a crucial role in the events to come. The gentle breeze swayed the olive leaves. The silence was almost palpable. It was as if all creation was prepared to hear something sacred. What Jesus silently revealed through his gaze was already communicating more than 1,000 words. And then, finally, Jesus broke the silence with a phrase that would echo through the centuries. Jesus looked into Joseph's eyes and said, The courage you seek is already in your heart. Use it when I can no longer speak for myself." These simple words carried profound weight. Jesus was prophetically preparing Joseph for the moment when he would have to make the most courageous decision of his life, asking Pilate for Jesus' body after the crucifixion. Before I continue, let me pause for a moment. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps me understand that you're enjoying the content and motivates me to bring you more messages like this. Returning to our story. That unique message from Jesus wasn't just encouragement, it was a personal prophecy. Christ knew that Joseph would need supernatural courage to face Pilate, risk his social standing, and publicly declare his connection to a crucified criminal. The phrase touched Joseph's heart deeply. Jesus wasn't asking him to be brave. He was revealing that courage already existed within him, planted by God, just waiting for the right moment to manifest. It's interesting to note that Jesus didn't say be courageous or have courage. He said courage was already there. This shows a deep understanding of the human heart and how God works in our lives. And why did Jesus never repeat that specific phrase again? Because it was meant exclusively for that moment and that person. Something Jesus never repeated has a specific reason. Those words were tailored to the heart and exact situation of Joseph of Arimathea. It was a message tailored for a unique moment in the history of redemption. Jesus knew that Joseph would be crucial to the fulfillment of the prophecies. Isaiah had prophesied that the Messiah would be buried with the rich. Joseph was the missing piece in this divine puzzle, and he needed a specific word to find the necessary strength. Think about it. How many times did Jesus speak about courage in other ways? Do not be afraid, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. But with Joseph, he took a completely different approach. It wasn't about receiving courage, but about recognizing the courage that already existed. This is one of the most fascinating characteristics of the Gospels and Christ's unique words. Each person received exactly what they needed to hear, exactly how they needed to hear it. Jesus was a perfect communicator, tailoring his message to each individual's heart. Joseph treasured these words during the days that followed as he watched Jesus being persecuted, tried, and crucified. That phrase echoed in his mind. The courage you seek is already in your heart. And when the moment of truth came, he knew exactly what to do. In the darkest moment of human history, when Jesus hung on the cross and his disciples had fled in fear, Joseph of Arimathea remembered those words. The courage he sought was truly in his heart. He went to Pilate, a respected member of the Sanhedrin. Asking for the body of a crucified man was unimaginable. But Joseph was no longer concerned about his reputation. Jesus' life-changing words had wrought a complete transformation within him. Nicodemus, another secret disciple, joined him. Together, they took Jesus' body down from the cross, wrapped it in linen cloths with spices, and placed it in Joseph's new tomb. It was an act of love, courage, and public faith. That simple phrase had freed Joseph from the fear that had held him captive. He discovered that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Jesus had planted this revelation in his heart weeks earlier. Yeshua's profound words have this transformative power. They not only inform, but form. They not only teach, but transform. And in Joseph's case, they prepared him to become part of salvation history. But why isn't this particular phrase widely preached in churches? Why does it remain one of Jesus' secrets in the Bible? The truth is, this conversation between Jesus and Joseph of Arimathea is mentioned indirectly in the Gospels. The writers focused more on Joseph's actions after the crucifixion than on the words that motivated him to act. This is because many of Jesus' rare teachings were passed down through oral traditions among early Christians. Not everything Jesus said is recorded word for word in the Gospels. John himself wrote, "And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which, if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." Furthermore, rarely mentioned verses of Jesus often contain very specific messages for particular situations. The tendency is to focus on universal teachings that apply to all times and cultures. But this doesn't diminish the importance of these words. On the contrary, they show us how Jesus related personally and intimately to each person. He didn't use a one-size-fits-all model of communication. Each conversation was unique, each word tailored specifically to that heart. Forgotten gospel passages like this remind us that Jesus knows us individually. He knows exactly what we need to hear, when we need to hear it, and how we need to hear it. Maybe it's time we discovered what our personal message from Jesus is. The phrase, "the courage you seek is already in your heart," reveals profound principles about how God works in our lives. First, it shows that God does not place challenges in our path without adequately equipping us to face them. Second lesson, sometimes we spend so much time asking God for something He's already placed within us. Joseph was praying for courage when courage had already been planted in his spirit. He just needed to recognize it and activate it. Third point, what Jesus said privately to Joseph has universal resonance. How often do we also seek outside ourselves for what God has already deposited within us? Strength, wisdom, faith. They are often already there, waiting to be discovered. The biblical interpretation of Jesus' words like these shows us that He was a master at awakening the potential God had placed in people. He didn't just provide answers. He helped people discover the answers they already possessed. Joseph of Arimathea became one of the bravest men in the Bible precisely because he recognized the courage that already existed within him. He stopped seeking something external and began to access what was within. And this leads us to an important personal reflection. If Jesus were looking directly into your eyes today, what would He say? Perhaps something like, "The strength you seek is already in your heart. The wisdom you need has already been planted in your spirit. The faith that seems lacking is already growing within you." Jesus spoke directly to Joseph's heart because He knew he needed that specific word at that specific moment. But the principle behind the message is universal. God equips us before He challenges us. Have you been facing situations that seem beyond your capabilities? Remember, the capacity you seek may already be within you, waiting to be discovered. Sometimes we don't need more resources. We need to recognize the resources we already have. Yeshua's profound words to Joseph teach us that courage isn't something you earn. It's something you choose to use. It's not a feeling you wait for. It's a decision you make despite your feelings. Was Joseph afraid? Of course he was. But he chose to act despite his fear. Courage was in his heart, waiting to be activated by a decision of faith. And maybe that's exactly the message you needed to hear today. There is something profoundly meaningful about words Jesus spoke only once. They remind us that not all divine messages are for the masses. Some are whispered to the ear of the individual heart. What Jesus said to Joseph once changed not only his life but the course of history. Without Joseph's courage in requesting Jesus' body, the prophecies about the Messiah's burial would not have been fulfilled as God intended. This teaches us that our personal conversations with Jesus, those intimate moments of prayer and reflection, can be just as important as great sermons and public teachings. Jesus' powerful words often come in whispers, not shouts. Rare teachings from Jesus like this show us that He cares about the details of our individual journey. He knows our specific struggles, our particular fears, our unique challenges, and He has specific words for each situation. Joseph of Arimathea heard this specific word. It transformed him from a secret disciple into a hero of faith. What about you? Are you ready to hear the word Jesus has specifically for your life? Because when Jesus speaks directly to the heart, once is enough to change everything forever. The story of Joseph of Arimathea teaches us that sometimes the courage we seek is already planted in our hearts by God. We just need to recognize it and choose to use it, even when fear tries to paralyze us. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who also needs to discover the courage that already exists within them. Leave a comment, sharing the specific word Jesus spoke to your life, the phrase that changed everything and that you've never forgotten. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future messages about personal encounters with Jesus and lessons hidden in the Gospels. Each biblical story contains details that can transform our understanding of faith. Remember, Jesus continues to speak specific words to specific hearts. He knows your situation, your challenges, your fears, and He has exactly the word you need to hear today. No matter what you're facing, know that God has already placed within you everything you need to overcome. Courage, strength, wisdom, it's all already there. You just need to recognize it and choose to use it. May God bless your life, and may you find the courage that is already in your heart.